When my cousin told me he'd sold the house I inherited from our grandmother right out from under me, I collapsed on the kitchen floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Days later, I was standing in front of a judge, fighting not just for my home, but for my entire family legacy. That's when I realized betrayal isn't just a knife in the back. It's the hand you've been holding that guides it in. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button right now and tell me where you're from in the comments. Because trust me, this story twists harder than a tornado in a trailer park, and you won't want to miss what happens next. I remember that morning like it was yesterday. The spring sun was filtering through the lace curtains my grandmother had sewn by hand. Those little yellow flowers dancing in the breeze as I sipped my coffee, flipping through old photo albums. This house on Maple Street had been my sanctuary since Grandma Rose passed 6 months ago. Every creaky floorboard, every chipped tile in the bathroom, they were pieces of my history. The knock on the door seemed innocent enough. Certified mail, the postman said, handing me an official-looking envelope. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Notice of eviction. I had to read it 3 times before the words made sense. 30 days to vacate. Property sold to Westbrook Development Corporation. There must be a mistake, I whispered to the empty room. I immediately called Mark, my cousin. As executor of Grandma's will, he would straighten this out. Hey, Allison, his voice sounded strained when he answered. I was going to call you today. Mark, there's some kind of mix-up. I just got an eviction notice for Grandma's house, my house. The silence on the other end stretched too long. Mark? Look, I needed the money, Allie. My debts, they were going to break my legs. My blood turned to ice water. What are you saying? I sold the house.
I'm sorry.
Grandma's will gave me executor powers, and she left me this house. I screamed. It's in the will. There was flexibility in the language. My lawyer found a loophole. Script part separator equals. I hung up on him, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my phone. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Mark and I had built sandcastles together in Grandma's backyard. We'd scraped our knees climbing the maple tree out front. And now he'd sold my home. My inheritance for what? Gambling debts? I called my friend Elise in tears. She'd moved to Texas years ago, but remained my closest confidant. I'm coming, she said without hesitation. Pack your important documents. Don't talk to Mark again until I get there. The next 3 days were a blur of panic. I couldn't sleep in my grandmother's bed without wondering who would sleep there next. Would they tear down her rose bushes? Rip out the handcrafted kitchen cabinets my grandfather had built? When Elise arrived, she brought clarity with her Texas-sized determination. First, we need a lawyer, she said, spreading papers across the dining room table. Second, we need to understand exactly what Mark did. I found an attorney named James Whitfield who specialized in estate disputes. His office was downtown, all leather chairs and dark wood. He listened intently as I explained my situation, nodding occasionally, jotting notes. The language in your grandmother's will is clear. The house was left to you, he said, reviewing the copy I'd brought. But if Mark executed a sale as the executor, we'll need to review his legal authority.
Can we stop this?
I asked, hope rising in my chest. We can certainly try. I'll file an emergency injunction today to halt the eviction. His confidence was reassuring. In the meantime, gather everything, bank statements, correspondence, any conversations with Mark about the inheritance. That night, Elise and I dug through boxes in the attic, searching for anything that might help. My fingers brushed against an old cigar box tucked behind a stack of Christmas decorations. Inside were letters, dozens of them from Grandma to my grandfather during the war. And beneath those, a sealed envelope with my name written in her shaky handwriting. For Allison. Open only in dire need. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Script part separator equals. Inside the envelope was a letter, dated just 2 weeks before Grandma died. My dearest Allison, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. I fear Mark's gambling problems are worse than the family knows. Last month, he came asking for a loan of $50,000, his third this year. When I refused, I saw something dark cross his face. I've taken precautions. Attorney Gerald Simmons has the original copy of my will with explicit instructions that the house passes directly to you, with no powers granted to the executor to sell it. There's also a sealed statement about threats Mark made when I wouldn't give him money. Find Gerald at 1422 Oak Street. The key taped to this letter opens my safe deposit box at First National. #714. The passcode is your birthday. Trust no one else, my sweet girl. All my love. Grandma Rose. I looked up at Elise, my hand shaking. She knew. She knew he might try something. This changes everything, Elise said, already grabbing her phone. We need to find this Gerald Simmons first thing tomorrow. But when we called the number for Gerald's office the next morning, a receptionist informed us he had passed away 3 months ago. His practice was acquired by Peterson and Weiss, she said. My heart sank. Another dead end. The safe deposit box, Elise reminded me.
We still have that.
The bank manager examined my ID carefully before leading me to the vault. When I opened box number 714, I found a folder containing the original will, exactly as Grandma had promised, along with a notarized statement describing Mark's increasingly desperate demands for money. This is gold, James Whitfield said when I brought him the documents. But there's something strange here. The will filed with the probate court is different from this one. Different how? I asked, my stomach nodding. The filed version grants the executor broad powers to liquidate assets as needed. This original version specifically prohibits the sale of the house. He looked up grimly. Someone substituted a fraudulent will. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, just 3 days before my eviction date. I barely slept the night before, imagining myself homeless, Grandma's treasures packed into storage. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Mark sat on the other side with a sleek attorney in an expensive suit. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Your Honor, my lawyer began, we have evidence that the will entered into probate was fraudulent. Mark's attorney immediately objected. These are serious allegations without foundation, Your Honor. The judge, a stern woman with silver-rimmed glasses, examined the documents we'd submitted. Mr. Davis, she addressed Mark, can you explain why there are 2 different versions of your grandmother's will? Script part separator ===. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My grandmother was confused in her final months, Your Honor. She made several wills. That's a lie. I couldn't stop myself from shouting. The judge shot me a warning glance. Miss Carter, please control your outbursts, she said firmly before turning back to Mark. Mr. Davis, both wills are dated the same day, but one appears to have been altered after the fact. Mark's attorney jumped in. Your Honor, my client was given broad executor powers precisely because Mrs. Rose Davis understood her granddaughter's financial limitations. Ms. Carter has a history of impulsive spending. My face burned.
What?
I had never been irresponsible with money. James stood up. Your Honor, we have a sworn statement from the deceased indicating her concerns about Mr. Davis's gambling debts, not my client's spending habits. The judge nodded, reading through Grandma's statement. This is troubling. I'm issuing a temporary stay on the eviction while we investigate these competing claims. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for a full hearing.
2 weeks.
I had 2 weeks before I might lose my home forever. Outside the courthouse, Mark hurried past me, but I grabbed his arm.
How could you?
I hissed. She loved you. His eyes were cold. You always were her favorite. The golden grandchild, who could do no wrong.
But I needed that money, Allie.
Do you know what these people will do to me if I don't pay? That's not my problem, I said, but a chill ran down my spine. It will be, he muttered, yanking his arm away. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Back at the house, James sat with Elise and me at the kitchen table. The good news is we've stopped the immediate eviction, he said. The bad news is Mark's created a compelling narrative about your grandmother's intentions. But we have the real will, I argued. James sighed. We need more. We need to prove Mark submitted a fraudulent document, not just a different version. And we need to understand who's behind Westbrook Development. I'll help, Elise declared. I worked for a private investigator in Houston. I know how to dig. What none of us realized was how deep we'd have to go, or how dangerous this would get. Script part separator equals. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mark's warning echoed in my mind. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I paced through Grandma's house, touching the familiar wallpaper, wondering how many more nights I'd have here. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Drop the case or you'll regret it. I showed Elise the next morning. We need to find out who Westbrook Development really is, she said, her expression hardening. While James worked on the legal angle, Elise and I became amateur detectives. We spent hours at the county records office, tracing ownership documents and business filings. Look at this, Elise said, pointing to incorporation papers. Westbrook's primary investor is Phoenix Capital Group. So? Look who's on their board. She slid another document toward me. My blood froze. There, listed as a director. Richard Whitfield. James's father, I whispered. Your lawyer's father is backing the company trying to take your house, Elise confirmed. This is a massive conflict of interest. I felt sick. He's been sabotaging us from the inside. We confronted James that afternoon. His face paled when we showed him the documents. I had no idea, he stammered. My father, and I don't speak. I didn't know he was involved with Westbrook. Convenient, Elise snapped. I swear, I can explain, James insisted. Dad's been trying to develop this neighborhood for years. It's his obsession. And you just happen to take my case? I took your case because I'm good at what I do, he said, his voice rising. Because I believe in justice. And frankly, because I've spent my career trying to undo my father's damage. I wasn't sure whether to believe him. But strangely, the fierce sincerity in his eyes made me want to.
Prove it, I challenged.
Help us take down both our families. James nodded slowly. I know someone who can help. A paralegal who used to work for my father. She quit because of ethical concerns. The paralegal, Meredith, met us at a coffee shop far from downtown. Richard Whitfield and your cousin have been planning this for months, she revealed, sliding a folder across the table. Mark approached Phoenix Capital when his gambling debts got out of control. They offered him a deal, help them acquire specific properties in this neighborhood, starting with your grandmother's house, and they'd pay his debts plus a percentage. Why my grandmother's house specifically? Meredith leaned forward. Because it sits on the corner lot. It's the key to assembling the entire block for a luxury development. I flipped through the documents she'd brought. Emails between Mark and Richard Whitfield discussing the Rose Davis acquisition, plans for pressuring other neighbors once they had the corner property. There's more, Meredith said quietly. I overheard Richard discussing how they'd force you out if you resisted the eviction. Force me how? Threaten. Intimidate. She hesitated. Or worse. Script part separator equals. I felt a chill run through my body. These weren't just ruthless businessmen. They were dangerous. We need protection, Elise said as we hurried back to my house. We need evidence, James corrected. Hard proof of fraud that will stand up in court. That night, we developed a plan. James would continue representing me openly while secretly building a case against his father. Elise would set up surveillance cameras around the house. And I would do something much riskier, confront Mark directly, wearing a hidden recording device. Before I could lose my nerve, I drove to Mark's apartment the next evening. My heart pounded as I knocked on his door. Allie? He looked surprised, then nervous. You shouldn't be here.
Why?
Afraid your gambling buddies might show up? I pushed past him into the apartment. Mark's place was a disaster. Empty bottles, takeout containers, and what looked like betting slips scattered across the coffee table. You need to drop this fight, he said, running his hand through his unwashed hair. It's bigger than both of us now. I need to understand why, Mark. I grew up in that house. You did too, practically. How could you sell it out from under me? His expression darkened. You always had everything handed to you. Grandma's favorite. Perfect little Allison. That's not true, and you know it. He laughed bitterly. When I needed money for college, she told me to take out loans. When you needed it, she wrote a check. Because you'd already blown through thousands on poker. I couldn't believe his distorted version of events. Tell me how you did it, I demanded. Did you forge the will yourself? Or did Westbrook help? His eyes widened slightly. Be careful, Allie. These people don't mess around. You mean Richard Whitfield? I watched his reaction carefully. How do you know about Whitfield? He hissed, suddenly alert. I know everything, Mark. I know about the development plans, how my house is the cornerstone. I know they paid off your gambling debts. Mark grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. You need to forget all of that. For your own safety. I yanked away. Did you forge Grandma's signature? Script part separator equals. His face contorted. It was digitally altered, okay? They had someone who could make it look authentic. Not a traditional forgery. So you admit it, I pressed. You submitted a fake will to the court. Mark's eyes darted nervously to the window. They'll kill me if they find out I told you. I was getting everything I needed on the recording. I took a step back, readying myself to leave. That's when Mark's phone rang. He glanced at it, his face draining of color. It's him, he whispered. He can't know you're here. I ducked into the kitchen as Mark answered. I could hear Richard Whitfield's voice booming through the speaker. The judge is asking questions about document authenticity. Mark. Tell me this isn't going to be a problem. No, sir, Mark stammered. Everything's under control. It better be. We can't have that little bitch derailing a $30 million project because she's sentimental about Grandma's house. I understand, Mark said.
Good.
Remember our arrangement. You deliver the property. Your debt disappears. You fail. My finger slipped once filling out that gambling marker. It could easily happen again with a much larger number. The threat hung in the air, even after Mark ended the call. He turned to me, his face ashen. Now you see? He whispered. I'm trapped. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Back at my house, James and Elise listened to the recording. It's good, James said. Not conclusive, but it supports our case about the forged will. What about the threats? I asked. James frowned. Those are harder to act on legally. But I think I can get a restraining order. Script part separator equals. That night, I woke to the sound of breaking glass downstairs. I froze, heart pounding against my ribs. Elise, I whispered, shaking my friend awake in the guest room. Someone's in the house. She was instantly alert, reaching for her phone. Call 911, she whispered, pulling a small canister of pepper spray from her bag. We crept to the hallway, listening to heavy footsteps moving through the kitchen. Then came the unmistakable smell of gasoline. They're trying to burn us out, Elise hissed. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers, whispering our emergency to the dispatcher. But would help arrive in time? The security cameras Elise had installed were feeding directly to a cloud server. Whatever happened tonight would be recorded. Come out, wherever you are, called a mocking voice from downstairs. Not Mark, someone else. Just want to talk about your court case, sweetheart. A second voice murmured something inaudible. I gripped Elise's arm. We were trapped upstairs with intruders below. The hallway smoke detector suddenly blared to life. Police are 3 minutes out, I whispered. We don't have 3 minutes, Elise replied, pulling me toward the window. The old maple tree, the one Mark and I had climbed as children, stretched its branches close to the second-floor window. It was our only escape route. Go, Elise urged as smoke began filling the upstairs hallway. I swung my leg over the windowsill, praying the old branches would hold. Behind us, heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs as flames began to lick the walls of my grandmother's beloved home. Script part separator equals. I scrambled onto the thick branch, bark rough under my fingers. Elise followed right behind me. We heard glass shattering as the fire spread through the house, consuming Grandma's curtains, her furniture, her memory. Sirens wailed in the distance as we dropped from the lowest branch, pain shooting up my ankle. We stumbled to the street just as 2 men burst from the front door. In the glow of the flames, I recognized one, Richard Whitfield's personal assistant from a photo Meredith had shown us. The police arrived seconds later, catching the men as they tried to flee. I watched in numbed horror as my inheritance, my sanctuary, burned before my eyes. "They can't get away with this," I whispered as paramedics wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. The next morning, James arrived at the hotel where Elise and I had spent what remained of the night. "This changes everything," he said, his expression grim. "Arson, attempted murder. This isn't just about real estate anymore." The police detective confirmed the 2 men in custody were employed by Phoenix Capital, but they were claiming Mark had hired them. "It's your word against his," the detective explained. "They're saying Mark wanted to scare you into dropping the case." "That's ridiculous." I exploded. "Mark's terrified of these people. He wouldn't." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sorry, cousin. Had to make a choice." "He's throwing me under the bus," I said in disbelief. James's jaw tightened. "We need to move fast. The hearing's tomorrow, and now they're trying to frame you as unstable."
Me?
"They burned down my house. And Mark's telling people you've been threatening to do it yourself for weeks. If I can't have it, no one will. That kind of thing. Script part separator equals. I collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed. This was no longer just about saving my home, it was about saving my freedom, maybe even my life.
The courtroom the next day was packed.
News of the fire had spread. I sat beside James, trying to appear composed despite my exhaustion. Mark entered with his attorney, refusing to look in my direction. Judge Wilson surveyed the room sternly. "Given recent events, including the suspicious fire at the property in question, I've expedited this hearing." Mark's attorney spoke first. "Your Honor, my client has been the victim of Ms. Carter's increasing instability. When he legally sold the property, as was his right as executor, she began making threats." "That's a lie." I couldn't help myself. Judge Wilson frowned. "Ms. Carter, control yourself, or I'll hold you in contempt." James stood. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Davis submitted a fraudulent will to probate court, then conspired with Westbrook Development to force my client from her rightfully inherited property. He played the recording of my conversation with Mark, then showed security footage of the arsonists, clearly identifying one as Richard Whitfield's assistant." Mark's face went pale. "Your Honor, I was coerced," he stammered. "They threatened me." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Davis, are you admitting to a fraud?" Mark looked trapped.
I
was in debt. They promised to help me if I delivered the house." "And the fire?" Judge Wilson asked sharply. "That wasn't me," Mark protested. "Whitfield's people must have decided to take matters into their own hands." Script part separator equals. Judge Wilson turned to me, her expression softening slightly. "Ms. Carter, I'm inclined to believe your version of events, but I need more concrete evidence about the will substitution." That's when the courtroom doors burst open. A man in his 70s walked slowly down the aisle, assisted by a younger woman. "Gerald Simmons," the man announced in a wavering voice. "Former attorney to Rose Davis." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I gaped in shock. Gerald Simmons was alive? "Your Honor, I apologize for my dramatic entrance," Simmons continued. "I've been recovering from a stroke. When I heard about this case on the news, I knew I had to testify." The judge allowed him to approach. The woman helping him, his daughter, handed him a leather portfolio. "I drafted the original will for Rose Davis," Simmons explained. "She was explicit that her granddaughter Allison should receive the house without any possibility of sale. I've brought my original drafts and notes from our meetings." James could barely contain his excitement as he examined the documents. "Your Honor, these conclusively prove the will submitted to probate was fraudulent," he declared. Mark slumped in his chair, defeated. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Judge Wilson examined the papers carefully before looking up. "Based on this evidence, I'm ruling that the will submitted by Mr. Davis was fraudulent. The property at 423 Maple Street legally belongs to Allison Carter. Furthermore, I'm referring Mr. Davis to the district attorney for criminal charges." I clasped my hands over my mouth, tears streaming down my face. The house, or what remained of it, was legally mine. But the judge wasn't finished. I'm also issuing an injunction against Westbrook Development and Phoenix Capital, prohibiting them from any contact with Ms. Carter or development activities in the neighborhood pending a criminal investigation. Script part separator ===. James turned to me, smiling despite the gravity of our situation. This isn't over yet, he whispered. But we've won the first battle. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us. Cameras flashed as microphones were thrust toward my face. Ms. Carter, how does it feel to win your case against your own cousin? Will you rebuild the house? Are you pursuing criminal charges against Phoenix Capital? James stepped forward protectively. My client has been through a traumatic ordeal. She'll make a statement when she's ready. As we pushed through the crowd, I spotted Richard Whitfield watching from the courthouse steps, his expression cold and calculating. Our eyes met briefly, and the hatred I saw there sent a chill down my spine. Back at the hotel, Elise hugged me tightly. You did it, Allie. You fought those bastards and won. But the victory felt hollow. My house is still gone, Elise. Everything Grandma left me, her photos, letters, the quilt she made for my graduation, it's all ash now. Not everything, James said, setting his briefcase on the table. Before the hearing, I had a long talk with Gerald Simmons. He pulled out a small wooden box, beautifully carved with roses around the edges. He kept this in his office safe. Your grandmother left it with him for safekeeping. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were Grandma's most precious keepsakes, her wedding ring, the pearl necklace Grandpa gave her on their 50th anniversary, and a USB drive labeled family photos, backup. Tears blurred my vision. She thought of everything. Script part separator ===. James squeezed my hand gently. There's something else. The insurance policy on the house. It was triple coverage. I looked up, confused. Triple what? Your grandmother had 3 separate policies on the property. Standard procedure for houses with historical significance, Elise explained. Which means, James continued, a slight smile playing on his lips, you'll receive nearly 3 times the property's market value in insurance payments. My mind raced with the implications. Enough to rebuild and prosecute, James added firmly. We're filing suit against Phoenix Capital tomorrow for damages, emotional distress, and criminal conspiracy. Over the next 2 weeks, everything happened in fast forward. The district attorney charged Mark with fraud and conspiracy. The 2 arsonists, facing serious prison time, quickly flipped on Richard Whitfield. Apparently, he'd personally ordered them to persuade Ms. Carter to drop her claim, with explicit instructions that a house fire might be convincing. Local media covered the story extensively. Developers' arson plot backfires, read one headline. Family betrayal and corporate greed, announced another. I found myself reluctantly thrust into the spotlight as a symbol of resistance against unethical development. Neighbors whose homes had also been targeted by Westbrook reached out, sharing similar stories of intimidation. Elise organized them into a community action group. By the 3rd meeting, we had 20 homeowners ready to testify about Westbrook's tactics. James was relentless in pursuing our case against Phoenix Capital. While criminal charges against Whitfield progressed, we filed civil suits demanding punitive damages for the arson attack and emotional trauma. They thought they could intimidate you into silence, James said during a strategy meeting. Instead, they've unleashed a neighborhood revolution. 3 months after the fire, we finally had our day in court against Richard Whitfield. The courtroom was packed with reporters, neighbors, and curious onlookers. I wore Grandma's pearl necklace for strength. When Richard took the stand, his arrogance was palpable. He denied knowledge of any illegal activities, claiming Mark and the arsonists had acted independently. Phoenix Capital operates with the highest ethical standards, he insisted. These were rogue actions by desperate individuals. Then James presented his masterstroke. Emails recovered from Phoenix Capital servers showing Richard explicitly discussing how to eliminate the Carter problem and make an example of the holdout. Richard's face went ashen as his own words condemned him. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with their verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge ordered Phoenix Capital to pay $12 million in damages, enough to rebuild Grandma's house exactly as it had been and establish a neighborhood preservation fund. 1 year later, I stood on the front porch of the newly reconstructed house, breathing in the scent of fresh, paint mingled with the roses I'd replanted in Grandma's garden. Mark was serving 5 years for fraud. Richard Whitfield had been sentenced to 15 for conspiracy and attempted murder. The maple tree, miraculously surviving the fire, still stood guard beside the house, its branches reaching toward my bedroom window. As I turned the key in the lock, I felt Grandma's presence all around me. She had protected me even from beyond, leaving breadcrumbs of evidence that ultimately saved not just my inheritance, but my life. I stepped inside, running my fingers along the banister she'd polished every Sunday. Some scars never fully heal, but they remind us of our strength. My grandmother had taught me that betrayal can destroy you, or it can forge you into something unbreakable. I chose to be unbreakable.